In 1992, a video store clerk with no formal film schooling walked into the Sundance Film Festival and changed independent cinema forever.
He's a serious filmmaker. He's a unique voice for our time. He's a purist who is sure to leave an indelible mark on cinematic history.
That man is Quentin Tarantino, and his debut, Reservoir Dogs, didn't just announce a new filmmaker, it announced a completely different way of making movies. Sharp dialogue, non-linear storytelling, unapologetic violence. 2 years later, Pulp Fiction took that energy global. It won the Palme d'Or at Cannes, revived John Travolta's career, became one of the most quoted and referenced films in modern history, and grossed over $200 million. For the next 3 decades, Tarantino was a cultural event. From the bloody revenge saga of Kill Bill to the alternate histories of Inglourious Basterds and Django Unchained, he became known as the self-taught genius who answered to no one and turned a cinematic obsession into a career unlike anyone else's.
You give him a rule, he'll break it. You know, I mean, it's actually the great genius of being a self-taught, self-created person.
In the eyes of many of his fans, he can do no wrong. And for 30 years, Hollywood largely agreed with them.
I'm the kind of director that I want to play you as an audience. I want to be the conductor, and you're my orchestra.
But beneath that mythology lies a different story. A man who used his massive creative authority not just to break rules, but to indulge personal obsessions, dodge accountability, and quietly protect the powerful men who kept the gears of his empire turning. This is the story of what 3 decades of unchecked power actually looks like, and what happens when karma eventually catches up. Across his filmography, Quentin Tarantino doesn't just tell stories, he embeds the same personal fixations into them. These patterns go beyond style or coincidence. They point to something more deliberate, like a filmmaker using his position not only to create worlds, but to place his own interests inside them. One of the most talked about examples is his recurring focus on feet. If you've watched some of his movies, you would notice that this isn't isolated to a single film. In Pulp Fiction, the camera lingers on Uma Thurman's bare feet as she walks around a room. The pattern continues in Kill Bill, where the bride's bare feet are framed in various close-up shots.
There's something that is hard to not notice when you watch these films, which is there are a lot of shots of feet, especially your feet. A lot of
There's a lot of footsie work in this film.
A lot of
it's a very
footsie work.
film.
Yeah, in Volume 1 and in Volume 2, just constant. I'm wondering, there's this rumor that maybe Quentin Tarantino has a foot fetish.
I think he staunchly denies it, but you should definitely address it with him. He claims that every foot shot was essential to the telling of the story.
There are times where I don't see the point at all. There's serious plot going on, and then language shots of a foot out of nowhere. No, that's not true. But I'm just curious. It makes you wonder when you see the film.
In 2009, the same thing happened again in Inglourious Basterds, where Diane Kruger's character is identified and exposed by Hans Landa through her feet. Then, 10 years later, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood took it even further. 3 separate women, 3 separate foot shots. Margaret Qualley's bare feet propped on a car dashboard, while Brad Pitt drives her down the highway. Margot Robbie's dirty feet resting on the seat in front of her during a cinema scene. And Dakota Fanning's feet as she watches TV at Spahn Ranch. Across different genres, time periods, and casts, the same motif keeps coming back. At some point, it stops feeling like a stylistic quirk and starts feeling like a compulsion. Even Brad Pitt had to joke about it during the speech for his SAG award for his role as Cliff Booth in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
I want to thank my co-stars, Leo, Margot Robbie's feet, Margaret Qualley's feet, Dakota Fanning's feet. Seriously, Quentin has separated more women from their shoes than the TSA.
On its own, this already raises questions, but it becomes more revealing when paired with another pattern. Tarantino doesn't just embed these fixations into his films, he writes himself into them. The clearest example is From Dusk Till Dawn, a film Tarantino wrote and chose to star in. He plays Richie Gecko, a violent, unstable criminal, and in one of the film's most striking scenes, his character sucks booze from Salma Hayek's bare foot during her dance. He wrote the scene, and then he performed it himself. On the set of Kill Bill, there's a scene where Michael Madsen's character spits on Uma Thurman. Tarantino decided he would do it himself rather than let Madsen take the shot. His reasoning was that he didn't trust Madsen to nail it cleanly, and the last thing he wanted was Thurman lying there getting spat on again and again while someone else figured it out. On the same production, when it came time to film a scene where Thurman's character is strangled, he was the one on the other end of the chain. And on the set of Inglourious Basterds, when Diane Kruger's character is strangled to death, Tarantino pushed Christoph Waltz aside and wrapped his own hands around her neck, arguing that without real pressure, you'd never get the blood vessels bulging or the genuine panic in her eyes that the scene required.
But Quentin, you strangled Diane Kruger, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. And so I just said to her, what I want to do is, I'm going to be the hands, and what I'm going to do is, I'm going to just strangle you. All right? Hold on, I'm going to cut off your air for just a little bit of time. We're going to see the reaction in your face, and then we'll cut. And so we actually got a really good thing. We were, it was real. It would look really good.
Both women said they consented, but the pattern across all of it is the same. A director who consistently finds reasons to physically insert himself into moments with his female cast in the name of getting the shot right. Across his films, that impulse shows up in different forms. Sometimes as a visual motif, sometimes as a role he writes for himself, sometimes as a decision he makes on set. The pattern becomes harder to ignore the more you look at it, and the feet are just the beginning. Tarantino's films have always had a signature: sharp dialogue, stylized violence, and a willingness to go places most directors would avoid entirely. But there's something else buried in that signature that's followed him across his entire career: the repeated, persistent use of the N-word. It goes all the way back to the very beginning. Reservoir Dogs, his debut film, had it. True Romance, the screenplay he sold the same year, had it too. And he wasn't even directing that one, just writing. By the time Pulp Fiction came out 2 years later, people were starting to notice. Tarantino wrote himself a small role: Jimmy, a man who lets two hitmen hide a body in his house, and put the word in his own mouth multiple times in a single scene, used casually in a domestic setting, in a way that still makes people uncomfortable decades later.
You know what's on my mind right now? It ain't the coffee in my kitchen. It's the dead in my garage.
Some called it raw realism, but many thought he just didn't need to go there. 3 years later, Jackie Brown took it further. The N-word was used 38 times. The movie was set in contemporary 1990s Los Angeles, so there was no historical backdrop to point to and no slavery narrative to justify it. It was a modern crime film, and the word was still there. That's when Spike Lee first publicly called him out for it. Lee is one of Hollywood's most respected black filmmakers, the director behind Malcolm X, Do the Right Thing, and Black Klansman, and someone who'd never been afraid to say what others in the industry wouldn't. He argued that Tarantino's use of the word across his entire body of work had crossed a line, and that he wasn't the only one who thought so. He pointed to an incident on the set of the 1995 film Crimson Tide, where Tarantino had been brought in to do script rewrites. Denzel Washington, one of the most powerful actors in Hollywood, confronted him about it directly in front of the entire crew.
Your displeasure with his excessive usage of the word nigga in his body of work.
Jackie Brown's body of work.
Right. From Reservoir Dogs on up.
True
Romance.
Romance, which he wrote but did not direct.
Right. Do you think that there was ever a point where you could have maybe talked to him, pulled him to the side, like talked to him directly, and
that he's beyond that. Denzel Washington pulled him to the side. Quentin Tarantino did rewrites of a couple of scenes on Crimson Tide, and during the shoot, Denzel stopped and said, "Hold up." Stopped everything and pulled Quentin Tarantino to the side. And there was a big brouhaha right in the middle of the set. And Quentin Tarantino was trying to squash it. Let's go in the back. Then he said, "Nah, fuck that. Let's talk right now." So I'm not the only person who stepped up. Maybe it wasn't Sam Jackson, but I'm not the only person who stepped up.
None of this criticism stopped Tarantino. 15 years later, he went further than he'd ever gone before. Django Unchained, set in the pre-Civil War South, used the word over 100 times, and this time, the argument was harder to dismiss. The setting demanded historical accuracy. The brutality of the language reflected how black people were treated at the time.
You broke the record in the movie. I know Spike Lee didn't agree with Jackie Brown. A lot of other people don't agree with that. But what's your stance on that?
Well, again, in the case of Django Unchained, I think is absolutely silly because it's that was definitely the way. If somebody's gonna say you use the word nigga more than it was used in the antebellum South, I'm gonna say you're wrong.
Yeah.
I did not use it more, and I don't even think anyone can even say that with a straight face.
Right.
So then just get the fuck out of my face with that bullshit.
For many, that was justification enough. But even within that context, the conversation didn't settle. While the setting explained the presence of the language, it didn't fully explain the extent of it. A lot of people started to feel that Tarantino wasn't just depicting racism, he was lingering on it. Spike Lee refused to watch the movie altogether.
I can't speak in it because I'm not going to see it. I'm not seeing it. I think for me, the only thing I'm going to say is it'd be disrespectful to my ancestors to see that film. And that's the only thing I'm going to say. I can't disrespect my ancestors. Can't do it. Can't do it.
Lee wasn't alone. Several other black celebrities made their feelings known, including comedian Cat Williams.
Now, what do you think about Spike Lee saying that Quentin Tarantino is wrong for using the N-word 110 times?
When I see Quentin Tarantino, I'm gonna take this fist and I'm gonna put it right in his mouth where he say
Really?
Really. Quentin Tarantino think he can say the N-word, but I checked with all of and nobody knows where he got his pass from. I hope he didn't get it from Samuel L. Jackson and Jamie Foxx, because they not gonna help you when I see you.
Ah, okay, all right.
I'm saying that's disrespectful. I don't call Spanish people because it's disrespectful. Who would do that? Let alone do it 186 times in a movie for profit. Like, for real?
Tarantino didn't back down. In interviews, he argued that removing offensive language was a form of censorship, that if the world he was building was violent, ugly, and offensive, then the dialogue had to reflect that.
They're saying maybe I should have cleaned it up. Well, that's just not what I do. You know, there's film criticism and there's social criticism. And the people who have said, who've complained about my use of that have been social critics. And I have to say, there's not one iota of social criticism that has ever been leveled my way that has changed one word of any other script I've written.
By the time The Hateful Eight came out, set just after the Civil War with a black soldier surrounded by Confederate men, Tarantino had the same historical justification ready, and the word appeared over 60 times. Across his entire career, he'd used it well over 200 times across his films. The criticism had been loud, public, and persistent, and he hadn't moved an inch. That's when Samuel L. Jackson, who'd starred in both Pulp Fiction and Django Unchained, and was now leading The Hateful Eight, stepped in to defend him. To Jackson, the people criticizing Tarantino were missing the point entirely, focusing on the words rather than what those words were doing in the story.
I hear people criticizing him. I always go, well, you're not paying attention to what's going on. All you're doing is listening to words. And if you're going to characterize or criticize his dialogue, then we need to go back through the dialogue of Straight Outta Compton or even Chirac or wherever else and go, well, if you're not going to censor that, then you can't censor this.
Spike Lee had expressed his complete disapproval. Denzel had confronted him on a film set. Cat Williams had threatened him on camera. And through all of it, Tarantino hadn't changed a single word. Instead, he just kept winning. Django won a Golden Globe and 2 Oscars, and The Hateful Eight picked up an Oscar too. He was one of Hollywood's most celebrated directors, winning awards, selling tickets, and no matter how loud the criticism got, nothing ever changed. Whatever side of the argument you land on, the dynamic was the same. This was a man who answered to no one. And as it turned out, that same untouchability had been covering for something far darker than a controversial word choice. Because behind every Tarantino film, from Reservoir Dogs all the way through The Hateful Eight, stood one man who made it all possible. And what that man had been doing for decades was about to become the biggest scandal in Hollywood history. If you've made it this far, you're already the kind of person this channel is made for. Subscribe. You won't want to miss what's coming. For nearly 3 decades, Quentin Tarantino's career was closely tied to one man, Harvey Weinstein. Their collaboration began in the early 1990s, when Reservoir Dogs received backing from Miramax, the independent studio Weinstein ran with his brother Bob. That partnership expanded with Pulp Fiction, a film that not only reshaped independent cinema, but also cemented Miramax as a dominant force in the industry. From that point on, the relationship wasn't occasional, it was consistent. Weinstein produced every Tarantino film from Reservoir Dogs through The Hateful Eight, a 23-year partnership Tarantino himself called a father-son relationship.
He wasn't just this guy who financed my movies. He was, kind of like a father figure. I mean, he was kind of a fucked up father figure, but that's most people's fucking father.
Yeah.
You know, he was a fucked up father figure, but he was like, you know, he was involved in, you know, my professional life for like a long, long time.
That relationship wasn't just creative, it was structural. Weinstein handled the financing, distribution, and awards campaigns that built Tarantino's career into what it was. And when accounts of Weinstein's behavior toward women began surfacing privately within Hollywood in the 1990s, Tarantino heard them. One of those accounts came from Mira Sorvino, fresh off winning the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress for Mighty Aphrodite, and at the time in a relationship with Tarantino himself.
Mira Sorvino told me that Harvey Weinstein began to try to massage her shoulders, that she was very uncomfortable. He began to try to get more physical in other ways. This culminated in her running away from him, and in her words, him chasing her around a room.
Sorvino told Tarantino directly, and this is how he processed it.
I chalked it up to the boss chasing the secretary around the desk, you know, as if that's okay. But I mean, that's how I kind of looked at it. You know, he was, you know, making unwanted advances. That's how I looked at it.
He said nothing publicly, and the partnership continued like nothing had happened. But Sorvino wasn't the only one. Uma Thurman, Tarantino's closest creative collaborator and the face of Pulp Fiction, had been through something far worse. Weinstein had sexually assaulted her in the years following Pulp Fiction, and she told Tarantino directly. On this occasion, he did act. He confronted Weinstein privately and warned him to stop. But privately is the key word. Weinstein stayed in his role, and the same structure that had protected him through the Sorvino situation protected him again.
Everybody who was in his orbit knew about it. There's nobody who said they didn't know that didn't know. If you were in his orbit, and that includes all the big actors who he palled around with, like, they all knew. They didn't know they didn't know anything about rapes, but they had heard.
Yeah.
They had heard things.
Everybody turned a blind eye. That's how it worked. And despite everything, the partnership between Weinstein, Tarantino, and Thurman continued.
We were sitting there drinking pints, and I came up with I said, you know, I'm thinking about doing another movie, Uma. You would be terrific for it, is if we do a revenge movie.
That movie was Kill Bill, produced by Weinstein, directed by Tarantino, starring Uma Thurman. The man who had assaulted her was now financing the film she was making with the man she'd told about it. Released in 2 volumes in 2003 and 2004, it became one of the most celebrated action films ever made. But it was during the production of Volume 2 that things took a turn that would define the relationship between Tarantino and Thurman for the next 15 years. On the final day of shooting in Mexico, Uma was scheduled to drive a convertible Carmen Ghia down a road for a scene. It wasn't considered a stunt, just a simple driving shot. But before the take, a crew member told her the car might not be handling properly after being converted from stick shift to automatic. She went to Tarantino and asked for a stunt driver. He refused. He came to her trailer, told her the road was straight and safe, and instructed her to hit 40 miles per hour or her hair wouldn't blow the right way and he'd make her do it again. She trusted him, so she got in the car. But the road wasn't straight. It was sandy, unpaved, and had a bend Tarantino hadn't accounted for. Uma suffered a concussion, damaged knees, and a permanently injured neck. Tarantino would later call it the biggest regret of his life. But what happened next was arguably worse than the crash itself. Uma wanted to see the footage, to understand what had gone wrong. But it was controlled by Miramax, Weinstein's company, who told her she could only view it if she signed a document releasing them from any liability for her future pain and suffering. She refused. The footage disappeared, locked away for 14 years. Tarantino didn't plan that cover-up. There's no evidence he did, but he was the director, he was Weinstein's closest creative partner, and he had the standing to fight for her publicly, yet chose not to. Instead, he and Uma were left to promote Kill Bill together, while their relationship quietly fell apart. In 2004, they had a confrontation at Soho House in New York. Uma wanted the footage, but Tarantino told her that withholding it was what they had all decided. She walked away feeling completely betrayed by the one person she thought was on her side. For the next 13 years, the footage stayed hidden. Weinstein remained one of the most powerful men in Hollywood, and Tarantino kept making films with him. Then, in October 2017, everything changed. The New York Times published an investigation detailing decades of sexual harassment and assault allegations against Harvey Weinstein. Within days, dozens of women had come forward. Among them was Daryl Hannah, who'd worked alongside Uma on Kill Bill, alleging that Weinstein had repeatedly sexually harassed her during the promotion of the film. The industry that had protected him for 30 years turned on him almost overnight. He was fired from his own company and expelled from the Academy. It was in the aftermath of that collapse that Tarantino finally went to Uma. Their relationship had quietly mended over the years, and she had largely come to forgive him for the crash. She asked him to find the footage. He tracked it down, had it digitized, and delivered it to her. It could be that Weinstein's fall from power made it easier to bypass the corporate barriers that had previously kept it locked away, or it could simply be that Tarantino jumped ship with his loyalties when he saw that Weinstein was done for. Either way, Uma finally had what she'd been after for 14 years. She released it in February 2018, alongside a New York Times interview. And in a since-deleted Instagram post, she wrote, "Quentin Tarantino was deeply regretful and remains remorseful about this sorry event, and gave me the footage years later so I could expose it and let it see the light of day, regardless of it most likely being an event for which justice will never be possible. He also did so with full knowledge it could cause him personal harm, and I am proud of him for doing the right thing and for his courage. The cover-up after the fact is unforgivable. For this, I hold Lawrence Bender, E. Bennett Walsh, and the notorious Harvey Weinstein solely responsible. They lied, destroyed evidence, and continue to lie about the permanent harm they caused and then chose to suppress. As for Weinstein, he's 73, wheelchair-bound, and still in court. His original New York conviction was overturned on procedural grounds. He's currently being retried for the third time, and a separate 16-year California sentence is waiting for him after that. He has leukemia, he's had emergency heart surgery, and he told a judge his mental state is collapsing. Meanwhile, Tarantino still mourns their relationship.
I wish I talked to him. I wish I had sat him down and go, Harvey, you can't do this. You're gonna fuck up everything.
He knew. He heard, and for 20 years, he said nothing that made any difference. But Weinstein wasn't the only powerful man Tarantino defended. In 2003, he appeared on The Howard Stern Show and was asked about Roman Polanski, the acclaimed director who'd fled the United States in 1977 after pleading guilty to the unlawful sexual intercourse with a 13-year-old girl he'd drugged at a Hollywood party. The interview was largely forgotten at the time. Then, in February 2018, the same month Uma Thurman's story broke, it resurfaced, and what people heard stopped them cold.
I don't consider him a rapist.
Right, that's the one. How can you defend? See, I don't understand this. How come Hollywood embraces this madman, this director who raped a 13-year-old?
He didn't rape a 13-year-old. It was statutory rape.
Yeah,
all right.
Well,
that's not quite the same thing. All right?
on.
Enough said. It's not statutory rape. You know, he had sex with a minor. All right, that's not rape. To me, when you use the word rape, all right, you're talking about violent, throwing them down. It's like one of the most violent crimes in the world. You can't throwing the word rape around is like throwing the word racist around. All right, it just doesn't apply to everything that people use it for. All right, he was guilty of having sex with a minor. All right,
that she didn't want to have.
No, that was not the case at all. She wanted to have it.
Well,
and dated the guy, and
she was 13,
and found out. Well, by the way, we're talking about America's morals. We're not talking about the morals in Europe and everything. All right.
Wait a second.
Morals in Europe, morals in China.
With a 13-year-old girl, and you're a grown man. You know that that's wrong because she has
giving her booze and pills.
I'm not. Look. She was down with it.
Oh, you're crazy.
And she's talked about it. She's talked about it.
You're a director. He's a director. Is that what's going on here?
I have a little bit of information on this, all right, as opposed to just popping off on this and that and the other.
Anytime a person's 13 and an adult has sex with them, I believe that's right.
Look, okay, I don't believe that's right. I believe it's against the law.
Right.
All right?
I believe it's right.
I don't believe it's right. I mean, not at 13. Not for these 13-year-old party girls.
When the interview resurfaced in 2018 and the backlash hit, Tarantino released a statement 2 days later. He said he was ignorant, insensitive, and above all, incorrect. He agreed that Samantha Geimer was raped. He also claimed he'd been playing devil's advocate for the sake of being provocative. The revelations of 2018 changed how people saw Tarantino, but for those paying attention, the picture had been building for years. The obsessive feet fixation across multiple films, the N-word written into script after script, spitting on Uma Thurman, strangling Diane Kruger, defending Harvey Weinstein, going to bat for a man who raped a 13-year-old girl. Taken individually, each of these things had always found a way to be explained away. But taken together, they started to look like something else entirely. Not just poor judgment, but a toxic streak in how Tarantino related to women, to power, and to the people who couldn't say no to him. In the years that followed, the world started to catch up with what it now knew. Me Too changed how people look at powerful men in Hollywood, not just the ones convicted, but the ones who enabled them and stayed silent. Tarantino sits uncomfortably in that last category, and for the past 6 years, there's been nothing new from him to change the conversation. Just silence, and everything from 2018 still sitting there. By December 2025, the cultural capital that had protected him for 30 years had quietly run out. So when he went after Paul Dano, not a monster, not a convicted criminal, just an actor he didn't rate, people reacted in a way they never would have before. It started on the Bret Easton Ellis podcast, the author behind American Psycho, known for being just as provocative as Tarantino himself. The two were ranking their favorite films of the 21st century when Tarantino brought up There Will Be Blood. He was ready to put it near the top of his list, but said he couldn't because of one fatal flaw.
There Will Be Blood would stand a better chance to be in number 1 or number 2 if it didn't have a big giant flaw in it. And the flaw is Paul Dano. Obviously, it's supposed to be a two-hander, and it's also so drastically obvious that it's not a two-hander. He is weak sauce, man. He's a weak sister. He's just such a weak, uninteresting guy. It's supposed to be a two-hander, and it's not.
It is.
So you put him with the weakest male actor in SAG, the limpest dick in the world. I'm not saying he's giving a terrible performance. I'm saying he's giving a non-entity.
Paul Dano's performance in There Will Be Blood earned him a BAFTA nomination and is still widely considered one of the great supporting performances of that decade. That's who Tarantino just called the limpest dick in the world. And Dano wasn't even the only one he went after.
Have you liked him in anything?
I don't care for him. I don't care for him. I don't care for Owen Wilson. I don't care for Matthew Lillard.
The reaction was immediate, with big names in the industry speaking up. George Clooney was among the first to address it publicly at the AARP Awards in early 2026. He didn't name Tarantino directly, but he didn't need to.
And I have a great affinity, and I don't enjoy watching people be cruel to actors. By the way, Paul Dano and Owen Wilson and Matthew Lillard, I would be honored to work with those actors. Honored. And this idea that we're living in a time of cruelty, we don't need to be adding to it.
After George, others followed immediately. Matt Reeves, who directed Dano in The Batman, called him an incredible actor and an incredible person. Filmmaker Jonathan Dayton called Tarantino's comments an embarrassment. And Toni Collette, who starred alongside Dano in Little Miss Sunshine, was even more direct.
What was said about him recently was utter crap.
Ben Stiller and Reese Witherspoon both posted in his defense online. And then there was Alec Baldwin.
I just want to say I love Paul Dano. And if you don't love Paul Dano...
When asked about the situation at the Sundance Festival weeks later, Paul said simply, "I was incredibly grateful that the world spoke up for me so I didn't have to." In response to the backlash, Tarantino has said nothing. No response, no defense, and no pushback. For a man who normally has an opinion on everything, the silence speaks for itself. For most of his career, Tarantino had the room to say what he wanted, do what he wanted, and face no real consequences for any of it. But now, the walls have closed in on him. The only question is whether what he's facing now is anywhere close to what he deserves.